Dear students, as part of the administrative theory, today we are going to discuss Chester-Barnard, particularly Chester-Barnard contributions to the behavioralism. Chester-Barnard has treated one of the important personality in administrative theory. Barnard is widely credited with having originated the systems approach of the study of organizations. He recognized that in order for the organization to survive in the external environment and to succeed in the long run, it was necessary to sustain cooperation from employees by satisfying the condition of efficiency. Chester-Barnard, a business executive, public administrator and author of management and organization theories, is one of the very few administrative theorists who propounded management and organizational theories and principles based on personal experience. He is considered the spiritual father of the social system school, which influenced many organizational thinkers of the last century. His outstanding classic, The Functions of Executive, was based on a series of lectures he gave on administration at the Loyal Institute at Boston and is a compulsory reading in the public administration, management and organizational studies across the globe. Life and work of Barnard. Chester Irving Barnard, 1886 to 1961, born at Malden, Massachusetts, USA, in a family of modest means, had to work hard for his livelihood. In 1906, he joined the Harvard and majored in the economics and government. Though he successfully completed his studies by 1909, he failed to obtain a degree on technical grounds because of lack of training in science and his inability to master chemistry. In 1909, he joined as a statistician with the Bell Telephone Company and was promoted as a commercial manager in 1915. In 1922, he became the assistant vice president and the general manager of the Bell Telephone Company at Pennsylvania and was promoted as the vice president of the company after 4 years. 1928, he became the president of the Bell Telephone Company of New Jersey at the age of 41 and continued until 1948. During his long career with the telephone company, he was also associated with the voluntary public service. Thus, he occupied many positions both in government and private administration. Despite his not earning a degree, he was awarded several honorary degrees, doctorates, prestigious universities like Princeton, Pennsylvania, Brown and Reuters. During his long career, he authored his most influential and best known classic, The Functions of the Executive, and published 37 papers, earned a distinct place in the history of the administrative thought. Barnard spent considerable time in understanding and analyzing the management. Oliver Sheldon, Elton Mayo, Mary Parker Follett and like others inspired his thinking. While being an active manager, he taught in various universities in the United States and published books on management. His book, The Functions of the Executive, brought him fame and continues to be the most thought-provoking on organization and management ever written by a practicing executive. It is a direct outcome of Barnard's failure to find an adequate explanation of his own executive experiences in classic organizations or economic theory. The Functions reflects Barnard's wide readings in psychology, sociology, social psychology, economics, anthropology, law, political theory and philosophy of science. Organization as a system of human cooperation. This is the famous statement of the Chester-Barnard. Barnard viewed the organization as a system of cooperation of human activity, but the individual human being possesses a limited power of choice and is constrained by factors of the total situation for cooperation. The most important limiting factors in the situation of each individual are his own biological limitations, others being physical and social. The most effective method of overcoming these limitations, according to Barnard, is cooperative social action. This requires that he adopts a group or a non-personal purpose and takes into consideration the process of interaction. With the basic premise that individual must cooperate, Barnard builds his theory of organization. Rejecting the old definitions of organization as emphasizing membership, Barnard defines organization as a system of consciously coordinated activities are forces of two or more persons. In this definition, he emphasizes the system of interactions. It is a system composed of the activities of human beings, a system in which the whole is always greater than the sum of its parts, and each part is related to every other part some significant way. As a system, it is held together by some common purpose, by the willingness of certain people to contribute to the operation of the organization, and by the ability of such people to communicate with each other. Raising the question as to why an individual should contribute his activities to the operations of any organization, Barnard strongly disapproves the concept of economic man and propounds the theory of contribution satisfaction equilibrium. Contributions which may be regarded in terms of organization as activities are possible only when it is advantageous to the individuals in terms of personal satisfaction. Barnard says that if each person gets back only when he puts in, there is no incentive, that is, no net satisfaction for him in cooperation. Barnard, while rejecting the viewpoint that man is mainly motivated by the economic incentives, analyzes the multiplicity of satisfactions and identities four specific inducements. They are material inducements such as money, things or physical conditions; personal non-material opportunities for distinction, prestige and personal power, which describes physical conditions of work; and ideal benefactions, such the pride of workmanship, sense of adequacy, altruistic service for family or others, loyalty to organization and patriotism. Barnard also mentions four types of general incentives. They are associational attractiveness based upon compatibility with associates, adoption of working conditions to habitual methods and attitudes, opportunity for the feeling of enlarged participation in the course of events, and conditions of communicating with others, a condition based on personal comfort in social relations and the opportunity for comradeship and for mutual support in personal attitudes. In discussing the relationship between the specific inducements, Barnard maintains that economic rewards are the ineffective beyond the subsistence level. He also says that the inducements cannot be applied mechanically and their proportion depends on particular situations, time and individuals. The arrangement of inducements is a dynamic process requiring experiences and imagination. Barnard feels that the primary function of the executive is to handle the economy of incentives within an organization. Barnard defines formal organizations, as we have seen earlier, as a system of consciously coordinated activities or forces of two or more persons. Organizations comes into existence only when, number one, there are persons able to communicate with each other, who are willing to contribute action to accomplish a common purpose. Thus, communications, willingness to serve and common purpose are the three elements in a formal organization. There can be no organization without persons. More than the persons, their services or acts should be treated as constituting an organization. Willingness can be expressed in terms of loyalty, solidarity and strength of organization. It implies surrender of personal conduct and depersonalization of personal action. Barnard maintains that in a modern society, the contributors to an organization always are only a small minority actually having positive willingness, and a majority is negative in their commitment. More importantly, the commitment of individuals always fluctuates, thereby creating unstable conditions in organizations. Willingness, positive or negative, is the expression of the net satisfaction or dissatisfaction experienced by each individual. From the viewpoint of the individual, willingness may be the joint effect of personal desires and reluctance, and from the point of organization, it is the joint effect of the objective inducements offered and the burdens imposed. For cooperation, there must always be an objective of purpose. The necessity to have a purpose is axiomatic implicit in the words system, coordination and cooperation. Purpose need not always be specific. Sometimes it can be inferred. Unless a purpose is accepted by all those whose efforts constitute the organization, it will not stimulate cooperative action. It may be useful to distinguish between the cooperative and the subjective aspects of a purpose. A purpose can serve an element of a cooperative system as long as the participants note that there is no serious divergence of their understanding of that purpose as the object of cooperation. To Barnard, an objective purpose that can serve as the basis for a cooperative system is the one that is believed by the contributors to be the determined purpose of the organization. Again, a distinction has to be made between organizational purpose and individual motive. Individual motive is internal, personal and subjective. Common purpose is impersonal, external and objective. The one exception to the general rule is that the accomplishment of an organization purpose becomes itself a source of personal satisfaction and a motive for many individuals in many organizations. In organizations, the accomplishment of a common purpose through the persons contributing towards it can be achieved only through communication. This is a dynamic process which translates purpose into action. The methods of communication may be verbal or written or observational. The absence of suitable techniques of communication eliminates adopting some purpose as the basis for organization. The formal organizations as systems are part of wider social system with interdependencies, with dynamic changes, and the organizations are more than the sum of its constituent parts. Barnard identifies 4 characteristics of formal organization, that is formal systems: depersonalization, specialization and informal organizations. In organizations, the effort of the individuals are depersonalized in that they are determined by the organization than the individual. Specialization is another characteristic, and in this Barnard's analysis is more or less on the lines of Luther Gulick's analysis of 4 bases of the principle, that is process, personnel and place. And lastly, Barnard argues that in all complex organizations there exists an informal organization. What is this informal organizations? Individuals in the organization continuously interact based on their personal relationships rather than the organizational purpose. Such interaction may be due to the gregarious instinct or fulfillment of some personal desire. Barnard describes informal organization as the aggregate of personal contacts and interactions and the associated grouping of people. Such organizations are indefinite, structureless and are a shapeless mass of varied densities. Such informal organizations will have a serious impact on the members of the formal organizations, thereby bringing a continuous interaction between formal and informal organizations. An informal organization to be effective must always establish formal organizations within it. In turn, formal organizations creates informal organization as a means of communication and to protect the individuals from the domination of the organization. In Barnard's words, they are interdependent aspects of the same phenomenon. A society is structured by formal organizations. Formal organizations are vitalized and conditions by informal organization. If one organization fails, the other will necessarily disintegrate. Though the relationship between formal and informal organizations appears to be a contradiction in the very nature of their definitions, it is a fact of vital importance. It is only when the individuals have the discretion to exercise their personal choice unimpaired by the purposes of the formal organizations, one can safeguard the personality and contribute to the formal organization to realize its purpose. Many executives with ample experience either deny or neglect the existence of the informal organization with their own formal organization. This may be due to their preoccupation with the problems of the formal organization or reluctance to accept the existence of what is difficult to define or describe. It may be noted that the organizations are quite unaware of the widespread influences, attitudes and agitation within their own organizations. This is equally true of political organizations, governments, army, churches and universities. It is important to learn the organization ropes in organization, that is chiefly learning who is who, what is what and why is why of its informal society. Barnard considers communication, maintenance of cohesiveness through regulating the willingness to learn and the ability of the objective authority, and maintenance of the feeling of personal integrity, self-respect and independent choice are the functions of the informal organizations. Barnard feels that informal organizations should not be viewed as a avoidable evil, and asserts that where they do not exist, they need to be created as they perform a number of functions to sustain the formal organizations. Theory of authority. Barnard's conceptualization of authority is most significant. He did not agree with the traditional concept of authority and introduces acceptance as the basis of authority. He defines character of a communication order in a formal organization by virtue of which it is accepted by contributor or member of the organization as governing the action he contributes, that is, as determining what he does or is not to do so far the organization is concerned. This definition has both subjective and objective aspects. The former implies acceptance of a communication as authority. The latter is concerned with the character in the communication by virtue of which it is accepted. Individuals in the organization accept authority only when the following four conditions obtain simultaneously. Number 1, when the communication is understood. Unless the communications are intelligible, they cannot be understood and in consequence have no authority. Orders issued in general terms encounter problems of interpretation and implementation. As most communications in organizations are general and unintelligible, Barnard says most of the time is spent on interpretation and reinterpretation of orders to concrete situations. Second, consistency with the organization purpose. Any communication not compatible with the purpose of the organization is unlikely to be accepted. Because of the cross purposes, it may result in frustrated action. An intelligent person will deny authority if he understands that it is a contradiction with the purposes of organization. Any apparent conflict has to be explained, otherwise orders are not likely to be executed. Compatibility with the personal interest. If the communications are determinable to the personal interests of the individuals, they have little chance of being accepted. Similarly, the order should also provide positive inducements to the individual to motivate them, or else the orders would be disobeyed or evaded as inconsistent with the personal interest. The case of voluntary resignations from organizations can be explained on the basis. Fourth, physical and mental ability to comply. In cases where a person is unable to comply with an order, it will be generally be disobeyed or disregarded. Therefore, orders should not be beyond the mental and physical capacity of individuals. From the foregoing, it is evident that the determination of authority lies with the subordinate. Then question is how to ensure enduring the cooperation of an individual in an organization. According to Barnard, it is possible under three conditions. When the orders issued in organizations are in accordance with the four conditions discussed above. B, when the orders fall within the zone of indifference. And C, when the group influences the individual, resulting in the stability of the zone of indifference. The principle of good executive conduct is that the orders that cannot be obeyed should not be issued. When the issue of orders which are initially or apparently unacceptable becomes necessary, then a preliminary education of a pervasive efforts or offering of inducement should be made so that the issue is not raised, resulting in the acceptance of authority. Zone of indifference. The acceptance of authority in organizations, as noted, depends on the zone of indifference. If the orders are arranged in order of their acceptability to the person affected, they fall into three different categories, namely 1, those which will clearly be unacceptable and not obeyed, those which are on neutral line, that is either just acceptable or just unacceptable, and 3, those which are unquestionably acceptable. Orders which fall under the last category come within the zone of indifference. As long as the orders fall within the zone, they will be accepted by the individuals unmindful of the nature of authority. The zone of indifference will vary depending upon the inducements offered and the burdens and the sacrifices made by the individuals in the organization. It is clear that when the inducements are not adequate, the range of orders that will be accepted will be limited. The executives in the organization should be conscious of the zone and issue only those orders which fall within the zone. To do otherwise would be to open themselves to the charge that they do not know how to use authority or are abusing it. Acceptance of the authority is also based on the realization that denying the authority of an organization communication is a threat to the interest of the all individuals who derive a net advantage from their connection with the organization. The fiction of authority. The efficiency of an organization depends on the degree to which the individual accept the orders. Normally, the authority of a communication will not be denied, as they know it is threat to all individuals who receive a net benefit from the organization. Therefore, at any time, the contributors have an active personal interest in the orders, which to them are within the zone of indifference. This interest is maintained largely because of the informal organization. It may also be due to public or organizational opinion, feeling in the ranks or group attitude. The fiction of authority establishes the presumption that individual accepts orders from superiors because they want to avoid making issue of such orders and avoid incurring personal subservience or loss of personal status with their colleagues. The contributors accept the authority of communication as care is taken to see only acceptable communications are issued. Most of them fall within the zone of personal indifference, and the communal sense influences the motives of the contributors. The following factors control the character of the communication system as a system of objective authority. 1. The channels of communication should be definite. 2. Objective authority requires a definite formal channel of communication to every member of organization. 3. The line of communication should be as direct and as short as possible. 4. The complete line of communication should usually be used. 5. The competence of the persons serving as communication centers, that is, officers and supervisory heads, should be adequate. 6. The line of communication should not be interrupted during the time when the organization is functioning. And 7. Every communication should be authenticated. Decision making. Organizations take decisions to achieve the purpose for which they come into being. Barnard defines decision as acts of the individuals which are the result of the deliberation, calculation and thought involving the ordering of means to ends. There are two types of decisions, personal and organizational. The former relates to the participation or otherwise in the organizational process and are taken outside the organization based on incentives organizations offer, and they need to be necessarily be logical. On the other hand, the organizational decisions related to the organizational purpose, information based, logical and can be delegated. They are the result of the discrimination, analysis and choice. Decision making in organizations, according to Barnard, is a specialized process. He emphasizes that organizational decisions need not always be positive. This is clear when he says that the fine art of executive decision consists in not deciding questions that are not pertinent, in not deciding prematurely, in not making decisions that cannot be made effective, and in not making decisions that others should make. The executive functions. This is the book written by the Barnard. In organizations, executives perform various functions necessary to ensure coordination of the cooperative system. They also act as channels of communication. However, All the work undertaken by them, according to Barnard, is not an executive work. Quite often, the executive may undertake certain functions like the vice chancellor giving classroom lectures or a manager selling the products, which cannot be called executive work. To Barnard, executive work involves a specialized work of maintaining the organization in operation. The executive functions are like those of the nervous system, including the brain in relation to the rest of the body. Barnard classified the functions of the executive under three heads, namely formulation of purpose and objectives, maintenance of organization communication, and securing essential services from the individuals. Formulation of purpose and objectives. The first function of the executive is to formulate and define purpose, objectives, and ends of the organization. The purpose of the organization must be accepted by all the contributors to the system. Purpose must be subdivided into fragments and specific objectives must reflect the detailed purposes and actions. The purpose can be geographic, social, and functional, and a single executive can accomplish and can do only that part of it which relates to his position. Assumption of responsibility and delegation of authority are crucial aspects of the functions of the executive. At every level below, purpose, objectives, and direction get redefined with a reference to that level, the time, the results to be accomplished. All this may involve up and down communications, reporting obstacles, difficulties, impossibilities, accomplishments, redefining and modifying purposes level after level. The informal organizations promote the means of organizational communication. With good informal organizations, the need for formal decision gets reduced except in emergencies. Even a formal order implies the informal agreement. The executives must always try to avoid orders which are clearly unacceptable and should deal with such situations through informal means. The informal organizations perform the following functions: communicate unintelligible facts, opinions, suggestions, and suspicions which cannot easily pass through formal channels, minimize excessive cliques of political influence, promote self-discipline of the group, possible the development of important personal influences in the organization. Leadership. Barnard attaches significance to the leadership in organization as it is critical to achieve cooperation. To him, the cooperation is the creative process and the leadership is the indispensable fulminator of its forces. One of the functions of the leader is to create an environment that will facilitate commitment to the members of the organization. Barnard argues that leaders should be a realist and should recognize the need for action even when outcomes cannot be foreseen. He should also be an idealist to pursue the goals which may not be achieved in the immediate future. Barnard lists out 5 essential qualities of a leader, namely vitality and endurance, decisiveness, persuasiveness, responsibility, and intellectual capacity. According to the Barnard, cooperation as a basic necessity of human life and as the cause of human development is profoundly elucidated by the Chester Barnard. The physical, biological, and social factors affecting the cooperative action and the functions of the executive to facilitate the cooperative effort are brilliantly analyzed with a practical wisdom by Barnard. A number of his remarks, conclusions, and evaluations demonstrated an unusually profound understanding of the complexity of the organizational processes. The point he makes about the constant need to consider strategic factors in taking managerial decision is worthy of attention. So too his formulation of the zone of indifference. His acceptance, concept of authority, leadership as a process of fulfilling the purposes of organization and management by consent have an immense contemporary value and strengthen the democratic spirit in the modern world.